Yo, Eyeduka is here. I finally managed to make my first tier 2 builds after a lot of grinding actually, a lot of blessing stacking. I didn't stop playing the game for the last about half a year. So that was a big grind, but yeah, I finally managed to make the first tier 2 build. And it's not perfect, it's not really what I want for PvP, but I think it does the job. I will show you in the end some preview of what I was capable of doing with this currently. In the future, things will change, but right now it's okay, I would say. And it's relatively accessible to get this right now because the best possible PvP gear would be really difficult to obtain right now. That would be the Vanguard set. So I have something completely different. So let's get into it. So first of all, this is the gear preset. Here I have named PvP Nebula. This is specifically oriented for Nebula PvP, as in my opinion is the most beneficial thing you can do. Of course, it's for limited time, but there you can actually reliably get loot to help yourself progress. What is the idea behind PvP Nebula build? Basically, you want to be at the same time efficient at killing enemies, NPCs. Also, you want to be ready on the spot to get into PvP at any given time. You can choose to have two different sets, of course, for PvP and PvE, and maybe small differences and variations between skills, mastery, stuff like that. However, I would strongly recommend not to do it because you always have to switch and you're going to have this cooldown where you're basically useless. You cannot really do anything. And that's really not the best solution. Personally, I found out that it's better to just focus on both of things at the same time. So it's a bit trickier. And this is the whole idea of Nebula anyway. It's PvX type of content. So you're going to be constantly in PvP fights and in PvE fights with enemies. And also keep in mind, Nebula enemies are actually pretty tough. Most minions are in the range of 200 or 300k HP, and they hit hard, generally speaking. So this is what this build is all about. I will post a link for the builds in the description of the video, so you can look a bit closer into what I have, but I'm just gonna go through it right now. I showed you before, these are the two main weapons you wanna get in the beginning for PvP. There is an option, if you just check this, you can focus a bit more on collision chance if you want. So those are the actual stats right now. You can see something different on questlog, because in questlog, I've put the best possible thing you wanna be aiming for. However, it's not that easy to get those things right away. So you see these stats here, they're not going to be the same on questlog. You're going to have slightly different stats and actually going to be like a bit stronger on questlog because it's just going to have the best possible things for you. However, there is a bit of RNG with some of those things, so I don't have the best things right now. But the most difficult part is the artifacts. We're going to get into that later. So instead of a critical hit chance on both of your weapons, you can actually choose to go extra collision chance on the sword and extra stun chance on the great sword. That's if you want to go that route. Personally, I went for the classical hit chance, heavy attack chance, critical hit chance on both of them because I want to be also reliable in PvE as well, because most likely in the beginning you want to have only just one of each weapons. That's why you want to make it equally good for both of the scenarios. I chose Oblivion Rat set simply because it was one of the things I wanted to try out. It felt really cool with the additional HP synergy. But also the other actual set that I really want is the Vanguard, which is just really expensive right now. And all of that took me basically the first 3 weeks of the expansion. I was grinding hard, completely drained myself of almost everything I have, most of the resource, most of the materials. And as you can see right here, some of the previous videos you've seen much bigger amounts of Sound and Lucent. It cost me to get all that. I would count mostly the gear because I got the weapons early on. I think I got most of these almost at the same time. I wanted to actually fuel an upgrade and get all the things at once. I was close to 15,000 Lucent. That just from grinding the game. I'm not spending any money on the game. At this point, I've just been grinding really hard. I was about 15,000 Lucent. Now I'm 2,000. And I had about 250 million Sound, I would say. So that's roughly about 200 million Sound as well, plus most of my materials as well. Oblivion Rat set is great for extra sustain because of the HP plus heavy attack chance, so that's going to help you a lot with DPS no matter what. It's not as tanky for PvP, it's not that good. It's good enough in my opinion. I chose the Grieving Vengeance Cloak. It's just a bit extra tanky. You have other options to be more DPS oriented. However, I feel like the hit chance at this point is okay. It's not too high, but it's okay. Once we have mana cost efficiency, later on, you're going to see why this is important because this is not the classical tank that you want to be doing. If you want a pure tank experience, you're going to need slightly different setup. This is more of a DPS oriented tank. So you're going to be dealing damage, not going to be as high damage as DPS, obviously, but you maintain presence on the field, decent survivability, not as much as a pure tank, but still good enough, while also being able to actually do some damage and be a threat on the battlefield, which means that at the same time, people will have to not ignore you completely because you can do damage and you do have controls. This build presents possible danger on the battlefield. You're not going to be just walking tower, providing utility to your team. You will also be doing damage. This is the main idea of this build. So you have some self-sustain as well, which is the reason I think this is very versatile build for early on in the game. Of course, yeah, it's still a lot of grind, but early on, if you're not pay-to-win player, you don't have all that loosen, you can't really afford Vanguard, this is the second best option in my opinion. For the pants, I always try to go iron armor. This one is leather, however. It's slightly lower defenses, so you lose a little bit of defense of both of them. However, the stats on the actual item are pretty good, so that's why I choose these ones. You see the necklace right now is actually tier 1. This is okay for PvP. Don't have very good options for necklaces right now. That's why I picked up this one, and any of the other that we have right now are still expensive and they're really not good for us. They're mostly on evasion. Generally speaking, necklaces for tier 2 are pretty tough. The only good ones for my personal build would be from Nebula, and generally we don't have many necklaces available outside of Nebula, so that's kind of an issue. Also, I made a small compromise on one of the rings. I actually just got this one earlier and I managed to just go for it because it's almost the same price as the other one. The other option was just a little bit extra hit chance and some other kind of stats. This one feels a bit more PvE oriented and it's give you like more overall stats, but it's also good enough. You can get the other one, which is the purity one, I think, that's just giving you attack speed, think strength and dexterity, if I'm not mistaken, and also hit chance. Somewhat better for PvP, but I think this is good enough in my opinion. Later on, you're going to check all the traits and stuff like that. Endurances are a bit lower compared to a proper full tank, but like I said, this is not the best PvP gear, so I think it's okay. Again, I prioritize countering melee as much as possible. That's why you have a little bit higher melee heavy attack evasion. Melee endurance is just generally less because of items anyway. Also, we have pretty decent melee heavy attack chance just because of the set alone, but also you can push that further if you want. Skill damage boost is also pretty decent because of the actual weapon, going between either skill damage resistance or you can have collision resistance, but we're gonna get to that later. Damage reduction on tier 2, like I said, soft nerf, 65 on all those pieces. Literally full tier 1, I had double that amount. Keep that in mind. So you're not gonna be relying too much on deflecting. In the future, you may not wanna be pushing much critical damage resistance simply because a proper full endgame build, you're gonna have very high endurances, so people are not likely to crit damage you anyway. Also a little bit of shield block penetration chance, which is always pretty good as well. The HP is decent amount simply because of the artifacts. We're gonna get into that later. So the mana cost efficiency, like I said, it's important. We will see that as well. Cooldown speed on this build is not that high, so all of the chances and resistances can be higher, but it's a lot of RNG related stuff. Some of it is runes, so that's not too difficult, but a lot of those stats will be coming as well from the artifacts, and I'll get into artifacts. You're gonna see why this is a little bit crazy there with the artifacts and how this is going on. But generally speaking, I try to push as much collision chance as possible so that we manage to be successful on collisions. We rely a lot on collisions for this build. That's why stun chance is a little bit lower. And of course, the resistances, that is the weakest part right here. We need to get much higher than that. The stun resistance is not going to be that high, but we want to prioritize collision resistance as much as possible. Personally, I feel like collision crowd controls are the most dangerous one. That's why I always prioritize trying to counter them. But this is low right now. This is pretty low. You want to go higher than 1000, I would say, for a tank, as much as possible, of course, because there will be other tanks. Most likely, you want to counter other tanks. You want to counter yourself. So if I go against somebody like that, we'll be just pulling each other all the time. We'll be just colliding with each other all the time. What you want to be doing, you want to be trying to resist that. So we're going to go higher than that. And as you can see, it's not too difficult to get to 1000 right now if I specifically go for it. So we want to go higher than that no matter what. And the reason for that is, again, because of the other tanks. So let's proceed with artifacts. Personally, I chose the Ancestral Armor because of the overall HP synergies that we have. Force capacity, which is increasing Vital Force maximum health limit to 36,000. And the only way to get that is with the Ancestral for the current setup. Otherwise, you're going to be less than that anyway. And the previous cap was 30,000, so that's 6,000 more, which results in about 120 hit chance, 20-ish skill damage boost, 25, 30 additional stun chance, which is really not much overall. but it's, you know, it's just something anyway. You have the passive right here, which as a tank, you can actually benefit from this. And because we're doing some DPS, this is actually not that bad. Whenever you're at 40% or less HP, you're gonna get base damage 15%. As a tank, you can maintain this position for some time. You're gonna stay alive longer than any other DPS, no matter what, most likely. So that's one option. Of course, you can choose to go with Zealot, which I didn't have right now. I just don't have the full Zealot set. The active here, for 10 seconds on being hit, you have 100% chance to increase damage reduction by 8 for 3 seconds, which basically means as tank, you get this proc at maximum 10 stacks immediately because you're gonna get hit a lot, which is 80 additional damage reduction. You know, we got heavily nerfed with damage reduction. This way you get back some of it, which can help with deflects and stuff like that. So the passive, which I don't have here, I cannot show you, but what it does is you have a chance when you get hit to recover 30 stamina, and has about 20 seconds cooldown, I think, which means you'll be able to block even more often. That can help out with a lot of things because you have a lot of procs that happen when you block. So that is very good on its own. And this would be the better option if you go full tank later on with Vanguard set, when you're going to choose to just be tankier while also doing less damage. But for this build, personally, when I'm trying to do damage as well, I would go with Ancestral. Now we're going to look at the skills and then we're going to check the masteries and go in between just to kind of like explain why those things work very well. And you can see in the end on the showcase, I use Cruise Might, which is the upgraded version of Valiant Strike. We use Shield Strike, which is Piercing Strike now, the upgraded version. We use regular Gaia Crush, Strategic Rush, Chain Hook, Da Vinci's Courage, Precision Dash, Devastating Smash, Witty Retort, Counter Barrier, Desperate Clash, which is the upgraded version of Fierce Clash, and Immortal Pride. As for passives, we're using a Robust Constitution, Vital Force when we talk about that, Indomitable Armor, Victor's Morrow, Resilient Mind, Aegis Shield, Spectrum of Agony, and Impenetrable. You can play around with these in slightly different ways, but I'll explain to you why I choose these. The weapons are giving us the Devastating Chain, which is basically upgrading the Chain Hook to 3 additional enemies in 5-meter radius around the target, which is really good for packing up enemies, both players and PvE enemies and mobs. Pretty much just works perfectly with the other passive from the weapon, which is Judgment Wave. Basically upgrading Gaia Crush. It has to be Gaia Crush, not Frost Cleaving. It's not going to work with Frost Cleaving. The regular Gaia Crush, now to attack 4 times in the same area without moving forward. And the last attack's range is increased by 30% and damage increased by 30%. Looking at the spec first, we're going to focus on AoE damage and AoE collisions crowd control. The counter barrier gets these almost all the time, no matter what. Chain Hook, additional range. We got nothing left for Strategic Rush this time. Desperate Clash is the Fierce Clash, as you can see. A lot of people are actually not using that, but I figured out it's actually pretty decent when you focus on a lot of collisions, and you're going to see why this is really fun using around. Full spec on this one. Witty Retort also gets full spec, also not very used skill. I'll explain to you why we are running this later. It's really important for a couple other reasons. Immortal Pride, usually I go for these two like all the time. On the Greatsword, we only have the AoE Cruise Might, which is just attacking enemies around you. Precision Dash has the bind for PvP, obviously, and also additional range. We have nothing on Da Vinci's Courage. Gaia Crush would get these two instead without the Frost Cleaving, so extra attack speed after that and more critical hit chance on the Gaia Crush itself. However, keep in mind, we're not really relying too much on critical hit chance. We're not doing too much crits in PvP, so you may as well change that to something else if you feel like. And Devastating Smash gets both of them for extra stun chance and stun duration. Now, going through the actual masteries, and then we're going to go in between to explain to you why this is really good for Nebula. First of all, we're going to go all the way down here. We're going to start with these. Now, this is a really tricky part here. You need 520 math. This is the only kind of a downside for any player that's brand new. This is going to take some time. Recently, I've got kind of a big compensation. I don't know if a lot of people got this. Oh boy. If motherfucker. If you got mail, that was the 26th of March, early morning Wednesday, during the night. If you got a fucking mail because of weapon mastery bullshit, then this is Christmas for you. Look at this shit. I don't know if this is the same for everybody, but holy fuck, am I reading this properly? You got 1,000 of 100,000 XP. That's 1,000. Fuck, man. Shit, are you fucking kidding me? Oh, fuck. Let me see. 1,000. Fuck this. 100 million. Is this serious? Holy shit, man. Oh, mama. Motherfucker. Okay. I'm gonna make the build much sooner than I thought. So I was gonna try to get 520. Holy fucking shit. It's so annoying trying to play with these off-meta builds when I don't even have the gear. I already got some before that, like I got some additional XP on the main weapons. 116, this one is 123. Damn, they just added this shit, man. Look at this fucking shit. Oh, the last few are fucking sick. This is what I really wanted. I wanted these 2 skills and I want to have all the 4 unlocked, which is, that's perfect. This is what we got. Sick. This was pretty surprising. Otherwise, I was sitting at 450, 460 master skill level. So I had to grind a bit more, but then after that, I got this big compensation, which helped me to just skip that grind. I was going for these additional other weapons to level them up a little bit so I get the points. Otherwise, going for the main weapon is going to take you ages to actually get that, and you're still going to need some additional. But getting to about 50 on all of your weapons is really not that difficult right now with the new stuff. It's just going to take you some time. Then your main weapons, you'll go above 100 anyway. So it would take a couple of weeks at least. Keep that in mind, depending on where you are already. But most people that have played before that, you'll be in a range of 200 or 300 more or less. So I'd say a couple of weeks to get close to that. So why do we need 520? Let's get 520 and unlock these 2 skills that are crucial for our build, especially Dragon Ascent. When it comes to DPS, this one is just overall pretty good addition. It just gives you 1 point of each attribute, which is total 5 points. And more points means more damage as well. Also helps out distribution of stat points, so it's much easier to get the milestones. We also use Destructive Spear. It's just for one enemy, but this just helps you single out one enemy and just do a little bit extra damage on that. It's not AoE, but it's still good. This is a bit tricky. Spirit of Defiance. Now in PvE, that's not exactly that great because it's just gonna push out enemies. But of course, this is Nebula, so you're gonna have PvP as well. And while it's not very good in PvE, you don't want to be like constantly pushing them away. Although even if you do that, usually you're the one that has the aggro, so they'll just get back at you anyway without even you pulling them. But even if you do happen to do this occasionally, you can just pull them back with the chain hook. You can just pull multiple enemies back to you. But it's easily avoidable in PvE. You can just think about it, like whenever you get fury attacks, just try not to defend. It helps you take off some of that pressure from you because we're not full tanks. And the final thing is really why I was talking about that we need mana regen and mana cost efficiency as much as possible, even though this build is not around that kind of thing. It's maybe even more reliable for mages or anything like that. Basically, what this skill does is when you have 60 or 60% or higher mana, that's the maximum mana you have, your active skills will cost additional 4% of your current mana, which means that the lower mana you get, the lower cost it's going to be, if everything is written correctly, of course. And you're going to do 140% of base damage. Additional 7% of your current mana is damage. So combined together, based on my tank builds, I was looking at around 6, 7, 8k mana. Obviously, you're going to get lower and lower, so you're going to lower the bonus damage because it's based on current mana. But generally speaking, you're close in range of 1000 additional damage per active skill when you use. It's only once per skill use, so it's not per attack because there are skills that do multiple attacks. It's only per skill use. Keep that in mind. Also, it doesn't say any restriction on whether you can crit or heavy attacks. So that could be a lot more additional damage. And of course, this is going to drain your mana a lot. So you want to have mana cost efficiency and mana regen. Another reason why we use Witty Retort, especially in large scale fights when you have a lot of enemies, what it says here, you can damage up to 3 targets within a 120-degree fan-shaped area. So most likely you want to try to attack 3 targets always. The spec here to do double use, you can use it twice. You're going to spam this skill in between, and in total you'll be able to recover that. So the first one is three targets, that is over 700 mana, and then you're going to pop it in again, another 700. That's like 1400. Of course, not including the actual cost of the skill, so you're going to be about 1000 mana plus just from using this skill. And also it's going to recover, the spec is going to recover stamina as well, which just gives you more options to block later on. So that is pretty good to additionally help yourself with the mana. Until you get to 60%, that's really good that it has this kind of a mana preservation option embedded in the skill. So once you get to 60% or less, you stop using the skill and you're going to go back to your normal attacks. You're going to not drain your mana that much. So it's not like some of these skills that are actually going to drain all your mana to the minimum. Then it's automatically deactivated. So that's pretty good, which just basically it means we're going to get the initial burst we need as tanks because we're not really bursting with damage. We don't have that much initial damage. We can't really nuke people. But if you properly play your stuff together, you may even have anti-heal if you want, like Guillotine Blade. I don't really use it, but you can put it around. Generally speaking, if you can manage to do that with all these collisions, you can control the enemy a lot, so they won't be able to do much because you just push them around. This is why collision is one of the most powerful crowd controls, because you have to wait for animation. Regardless if you use stun break or you have debuff duration, no matter what you have, it doesn't really matter. Once you get the collision, you'll be pushed around, pulled around, no matter what. You'll be just flying around, and you have to wait for that actual animation. This is not affected by debuff duration or your purification stones or whatever. This is how strong it is, collision. And we have a lot of procs with collision. Later on, you're going to see. The only way you can manage to burst out targets if they actually have some sustain. If they don't have sustain, then it's only a matter of time before they just exhaust themselves. You run out of DPS options, and you're tanky enough to survive that. It's just a matter of time until you catch up to them. And because you have all these collisions, it's really difficult for them to even run away from you, because you have mobility. You have precision dash, which is pretty long range as well. You also have devastating smash, which is also a ranged attack. You have distance, you're jumping around from a distance. Also increase range because of a spec. And on top of that, that's AoE stun. That's a really powerful thing you want to be using. Also, you have strategic rush, additional mobility skill that is going to help you out, catch up target. And in the end, you just have chain lock. So you have so many different mobility skills that it's really difficult for any enemy to run away from you. Even if they have more, they'll have more movement speed, they'll have some other dash and stuff like that, but you just have a lot of these. Also, an additional thing to keep in mind, there was change, I think, recently with how stealth works. Stealth in this game is actually not very good. It's not like some other games when you're actually invisible. You actually can see people in stealth. You see that kind of a shadow. Not too difficult to spot it if you're good with your eyes and just see how they move around. And if you're good enough, you can actually hit them with strategic rush, because strategic rush doesn't need to have target. You can't really jump with devastating smash, which would be really easy because it needs target, but strategic rush does not need to have a target because it's a mobility skill. Devastating smash is still a control skill, so you need a target, but mobility skills don't need to have targets on them. So you can basically, if you point your mouse properly, you can actually push stealthed enemy, and you can even push them to a wall, so you're gonna stun them, and then it's pretty much over, because usually they pop stun to run away from you. So they're already on the losing side. So if you manage to break out of the stun with a push or anything like that, then it's pretty much done. So the first skill is Roar Amplifier. This makes Spectrum of Agony just do damage no matter what. That's why we have Spectrum of Agony, just extra damage. It's kind of like AoE, extra damage around it. So that's just more for our DPS capabilities. Garrus Resilience, as you can see, we don't actually use Garrus Patience on any of these builds. The only reason I have this here is to actually being able to activate the epic skill. I don't really use it. It's actually good, but I really can't find other skill that I want to take away. So that's just preference. For DPS purposes, I also use Power Breach, which is whenever you use Shield Strike with the Retort, which those are skills we're going to use. We're going to increase skill damage boost for the next skill within 5 seconds by 150, but at the same time decrease your defense by 200. However, why I put this one here is because it's on your next skill for 5 seconds. So once you use the skill, supposedly it should remove the debuff that decreases your defense. So you just have to use it quickly so you don't get the negative part of reducing your defense. You can use this one as well. We have a lot of collisions. However, the problem with this one is it increases sword skill damage by 20%. And this is just on next one, no matter what skill. We don't actually have that many sword skill damages. And also on top of that, for that time, you will have your defense lowered. So it's not for the next one. So you're always going to have these 3 seconds of lower defense, even if you have increased sword skill damage. So this is not that great in my opinion. Another thing we use here, Bulwark Stance, which is basically ramping up your impenetrable, which is the more enemies are around you, just get more and more defense. So basically that's just perfect for PvP Nebula, because very often you're gonna have both NPC enemies and players. So altogether, very often you're gonna have around 10 targets or more, which is gonna give you almost 1000 whole defense. That's gonna make you very tanky in bigger groups. So the more enemies you have, the better for you, for all your AoEs, your collisions, and the extra defense. Then right here we use Unshakable Will, which, it has a small drawback, but personally I'll see as a whole being actually pretty decent. It increases all CC resistance by 150 and damage reduction by 15, but decreases main weapon base damage. It says only main weapon base damage, not the whole damage, by 25, which is your sword. And most of the time, you're not really going to be doing the majority of your skill damage with the sword anyway. It's not a big drawback, and it's only whenever you use Counter Barrier or Immortal Pride or Stalwart Bastion. We're using Counter Barrier and Immortal Pride. We're not using Immortal Bastion here. I just don't have any spot for it right there. And for the epic one right now, we have Resistance Scale, which is basically critical damage resistance based on max HP up to 20,000 max HP. So that is about 14% critical damage resistance, which means whenever somebody crits you, it's just going to crit you for less than what they would usually do. This is actually good for us because we still don't have a lot of endurance, and sometimes you will get hit no matter what, especially on tier 2, until you get proper endurance build. And the sad part about this build is that I don't see any other that reliable epic skill that I can put on that's going to make sense. Blade Momentum is only on Shoot, Throw, Annihilating Slash. I'm not really using those on the current build for PvP. It's going to increase your sword skill damage by 16.5, but also reduces your defense. This one I don't put on because it decreases heavy attack chance by a lot, even though we get additional skill damage resistance. And for me, this is kind of a drawback because I'm relying on heavy attacks for the majority of the damage in PvP. Now, this one is really powerful, Life Bargain, but I would say this is for pure walk-in tower build. You're basically relying on not dying at all and just controlling on the field, just being a utility, but you're also not going to do damage because based on what it says, your damage should go to 0. So none of these actually feel that great for me personally. Then for Greatsword, kind of a similar situation. It's balanced between defense and offense, but we have some utility here a bit more than usual. We'll start with obviously Force Capacity, like I said, a Vital Force max HP limit. The other one is Steel Sacrifice, which has one drawback, but I think it's worth it. It's going to make you even tankier. It's going to ramp up the Indomitable Armor to be boosted by additional 50%, but at the same time, we will reduce melee heavy attack chance by 100. Now, 100 is not that crazy, considering that we get a lot of heavy attack chances from other sources, but 50% on Indomitable Armor, 25% chance to increase all defense by 364 for 2 seconds, stack up to 3 times when you take damage, which again, as a tank, you take a lot of damage. You're going to be in the fight and you'll not be avoiding taking damage. So you're going to proc that pretty much all the time. 3 stacks already means over 1000 defense and all that. 50% means about 1500. So that is pretty powerful. Keep that in mind. Then the next slot here would be Dauntless Recovery, which makes Victor's Moral restores 1% of a skill damage as health, which is this skill, but also helps us maintaining some mana based on whenever we deal damage with skills, we restore 9 HP and 28 mana. So the HP is pretty low, the mana is okay, but now with this additional thing, it's 1%, so that's actually not bad. It's additional sustain. The other thing we're going to use here is Binding Warrior. Now you see that technically I don't have Cold Warrior on this build. The reason I put this here is mostly so I unlock this synergy, which is not upgraded yet. And later on, we have Far Strike, which increases the range of Devastating Smash, Frost Cleaving, and Ice Tornado. Basically, again, I don't really need any of these. It's okay, that extra range, but it's not that important. This is not the best solution. You can decide to remove that as well if you want, because we're not going crazy with critical damage anyway, but you're also going to get the critical damage resistance when you're below 50%. So this is versatile epic skill. You can, however, remove that later on and maybe use Blade Harvest, which is gonna recover HP. I think it's going all the way to 10% for the damage you deal for 3 seconds after you use mobility skill with Greatsword. Basically just the precision dash, and it has 10 seconds cooldown, which is pretty much the cooldown of precision dash itself, or a little bit longer. So what that means, every time you use precision dash, you will be able to also recover 10% of the damage you deal for the next 3 seconds, which is additional sustain. That's pretty good. You can replace Critical Equilibrium with Blade Harvest. But you always want to have this one. Obviously, I don't have it. Perception Balance. So you can see this is also a versatile skill. Stun and collision hit chance increased by 200 when user's perception is 70 or higher. The current build actually managed to get 70 perception, which then results in stun and collision chance being higher. Of course, you have the other option, which is pretty much the choice you're going to have to make depending on what you want. Your precision is below 70. You're going to get stun and collision resistance by 200 points, which is going to make you more durable. It's going to be more difficult for people to move around you and crowd control you. However, not only that, you can just drop 1 point, right? You get to 69, so you don't lose the other stats that come from perception, but you're going to lose the 70 milestone, which is also giving you hit chance and crowd control chance. So you can make this choice of either going very high on collision hit chance and stun hit chance, or getting much higher on stun and collision resistance. So you're gonna have to make that choice. And in the end, we also have Fortify Unity, which makes Da Vinci's Courage or Da Vinci's Shield, Blood Devotion, Devoted Sanctuary, which are basically just the upgraded versions of 2 skills, basically, to increase all defense of the targets by 400. Okay, 400 is a lot. And the only skill we actually use here is Da Vinci's Courage, the regular version. We don't use Blood Devotion because we're not that tanky. We don't want to go crazy. But the duration of Da Vinci's Courage is pretty decent. It's 12 seconds. You upgrade to 15 seconds. That's pretty good. For 15 seconds, you get extra defense. That's pretty much the situation here with these skills. I tried around with some of these, by the way, but I decided that I may want to have the extra defense from here and the extra HP proc from this skill. So just gonna put this one. This one is actually okay because you're gonna lose some of the health bonus, but you're gonna get extra base damage, which is great for DPS. But again, we lose a lot of the tankiness. That's why I decided not to go with this. You can experiment with that, just be a little bit less tanky, but that's really up to you. So basically, if you just choose that, you're gonna have to replace some of these skills, but you can just remove the Steel Sacrifice and go for Power Grip, which then it will not only, well, you're gonna lose about 500 defense when you're attacked, but you're gonna get back the heavy attack chance from this, and you're also gonna get 24 base damage. So this is gonna be overall just more DPS for losing the defense. So it's always about these choices. And the Reckless Assault, I didn't manage to make this work because I just don't have that many slots, and I want to be somewhat tanky as well. And this is an additional skill that's going to increase your efficiency, skill damage boost efficiency, but also decrease your defense. So that's why I picked up these. You can choose, if you put Raging Frenzy, you're going to have to remove some of these. So it's a bit tricky. You're going to have to play around with those things, make the choices. You have many different options here that you can play around. It really depends on your playstyle and what you're trying to achieve. If you just choose that Mastery, you can increase Raging Frenzy to 180 skill damage boost when there are 3 or more targets within 5-meter radius. So that is pretty decent. You can also think about moral boost if you want. The cooldown reduction on this build is not that high, so you can actually pop this and you're going to get a lot of collision procs to help you with cooldowns as well. But again, you're going to have to make choices, and most likely you're going to lose some damage, or you're going to lose some defense capability or offensive capability if you want to get that additional cooldown. There's another thing that you can do for more damage as well, but it's again mana hungry things. So here we are on the questlog build, which is kind of the ideal version of the build. And actually, just a small note, this video is getting that long, but I really want to talk about all those things. I want to put them in detail so you know what to expect. So you can see the stats here. You have a link for all these builds, by the way. You can check these other builds, but right now the one that I'm talking about here is called the Compromised Crusader Hybrid Gear, simply because we just don't have the best thing that we really wanted to have. So with that in mind, you can look at most of the runes are on point. Most of those other things are also on point. The skills are pretty much the same like we talked about. The masteries are right there. The current one that is set up. It's a bit higher here because I've stressed out what I want to put on. But generally speaking, that's the idea. 120 sword and 130 great swords. You can see that's the current build. Of course, in the future, you're going to upgrade some stuff. That's where I am right now. And I wanted to actually be able to test out things. That's why I'm going to have showcase of what this build is capable of doing right now. I don't want to do too much theory crafting without being able to actually test it on the field. That's why I don't go all the way through 100 or something. It's going to be too high anyway. This is more realistic for a lot of new players to build around. The last thing I want to talk about is the artifacts. I want to just point out that those stats here are represented. Those are the best possible stats that you can get with this setup. Consider that at first I didn't know how exactly the artifacts work, and now it's a little bit more weird than I thought. It is full RNG. I don't know what were they thinking, but you can do, if there's some mathematician here can just calculate how many different combinations you can possibly have until you get these particular things. So these are the best, in my opinion, based on what we're trying to achieve, the best possible options here. You can have random one of these. That's over 20 different things that you can get from here. That's the main stat. You have a total of 8 different sets. That means 8 different pieces in each of those slots can go. That is 1 RNG. Then 2 RNG is the actual main stat of some of them. Some of them are fixed. I think this one is fixed, so it's going to be that. But some of them have also a chance to be different. And we're looking for specific things, right? So that's one thing. Then you have, for a lot of them, you have like 15 or 20 different possible traits that you can get. They're all RNG. That's RNG as well. Some of them have, I think, this one, for instance, have even more. You see, like probably 30 or something. Then next thing that's RNG is going to be the level of the trait itself. So you have different those traits. So these have 3 levels, but then this one have less options, but they have 8 levels. So you get any of these randomly assigned to the actual artifact. So with all these things in mind, you have 8 sets, 6 pieces of the different sets. You have 15 to 20 different traits based on whatever kind of piece we're talking about. Then you have average levels. Like some of them have like 3 levels, so they have like 8 levels. That's 8 levels. So generally speaking, those have 4 levels. This is just insane to me, okay? So if somebody can do this math, I'm not good at math. Somebody can do it just to give us an estimation how many different combinations you have before you can actually just consider how difficult it is to get the very best of these traits possible. So yeah, that's crazy. Heavy attack chance, collisions, crowd controls. all these things, resistance and collision chance as well, I'm gonna add up and just min-max the build, but without this, it's gonna be completely different picture here. Keep that in mind. So that's really difficult to actually make. That's the only concern I have. Just to put it in perspective, look at the things I have randomly, and those are the best possible things that I managed to get so far. So this piece has melee hit chance. It's not maxed out. So when you have the star, that means it's maxed trait. If you don't have the star, that means it's not maxed. See, most of these don't even have star. This one has star, and it's not what I'm looking for anyway. So this has magic endurance, melee defense, and humanoid damage reduction. This is basically PvE oriented stuff. That's not what I'm looking for, but that's the best thing I got. This one has melee hit chance, just hit chance, and human. So not the best things I need. This is silence and stun chance. Definitely I don't need silence. Here we get weakness, collision, and petrification resistance. I really don't need all these. I'm looking for different things. This one is probably the closest one that I would want to have, and they're all maxed out. This is really rare. This is the only one I got. Collision resistance, melee endurance, and hit chance. And you can play around with the other things, but these are good enough for us anyway. This one has undead damage reduction, PvE, CC resistance, not maxed out. So that's gonna be for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and don't leave yet. Check out the showcase in the end of this video. Thank you and see you soon.
They said, don't fall, don't forget all the things you've been taught, you've been told. Don't blink, don't run, don't turn left or turn right or look straight at the side. My mind's going in circles, I'm trying to fight it. Getting these voices inside to stay quiet. Going to the place where all this began. Just start again. Oh, you won't see the light until the dawn breaks. No, till it's all said and done, you won't know what it takes. Gotta make a wrong turn and turn around. Gotta fall fast to pick yourself up off the ground. Until you get lost, you'll never be found, and you can't start again until you break down. Break down. Until you break down. They said, be me. Look beneath the bed before you go to sleep. Keep on, I shine. We'll surely get burned if we reach out and touch. My mind is a battle, I'm trying to hide it. Getting these voices inside to stay quiet.